From HeatherHansenPresents.com, this is The Elegant Warrior, a podcast spotlighting all of those people who strive for elegance at times of trial. We're talking about their definition of elegance, how they maintain it, and what tools or practices they use to help. I'm your host, Heather Hansen, and today's guest goes to war at the same place I do, the courtroom. Jonna Spilbor has a number of hats. All of them show her elegance for sure. She's an attorney with her own practice in Poughkeepsie, New York. She's a legal analyst for Fox and Fox Business and Cheddar, MSNBC, lawandcrime.com, and many more. She's a radio host with her own show called Happy Hour with Jonna and Keryl. And she has a blog at Gutsy Girl's Guide to Getting Divorced. Jonna also has a really interesting workshop that we're going to talk to her about called Positively Divorced Empowerment. If we've ever had a guest who knows about conflict and battle, it's Jonna Spilbor. Now on the Elegant Warrior podcast, welcome, Jonna.
Well, thank you, Heather. When you put it that way, I guess I do go to battle quite a lot.
You do. Not only, I was thinking about this because, the only trials we fight aren't just in the courtroom, they're
Right.
outside the courtroom, and you battle it out a lot on television.
Yeah. Yes. In the courtroom, in my business, and on TV. A lot of battles going on.
And I want to talk about each one of those sort of arenas
Mm-hmm.
because the courtroom, let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
You wanted to be a journalist?
Yeah. I wanted to be an anchor woman on the 6 o'clock news.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so how did you end up a law mogul?
It seemed like a fun gig. So way back then when I wanted to be an anchor woman on the 6 o'clock news, you don't just graduate from college, which I did at the age of 20, and get behind an anchor desk at Channel 4, right? But I thought that's how it worked.
Right,
What did I know? I didn't know. Didn't work that way. So in order to sort of work my way up to the anchor person mode, I took a job as a reporter, right? It's in the news biz, for a whopping $5.15 an hour.
Wow.
Yes,
Yeah.
which may have been below minimum wage back then, but I didn't care. I mean, I thought it was a foot in the door. And I did that for a time until I needed to eat. So I had to get another job that paid a little bit more. And I started writing copy at a PR agency, just doing all these kind of newsy things. And one day, over the course of just trying to build my career but not doing a really good job of it, my father said, why don't you go to law school?
Man, it's always a good option.
Right? As a plan B. Why don't you have a plan B and go to law school? And I was like, okay. All right. So after being out of college for a couple of years, I said, this is how I chose. I said, I'll take the LSAT, which is the exam to get into law school. And I said, and if I do good, I do good. And if I don't, maybe I'll have a plan C.
Right.
And the rest is kind of history. I am the only person who showed up for the LSAT without a number 2 pencil. I am the only one.
But I bet you were wearing heels.
Yeah, I'm sure I was. I was trying to self-sabotage, but it didn't work. Here I am.
So you went to law school out in California.
Yeah, San Diego.
And we're out there. You stayed out there and practiced for a little bit.
For 13 years.
Yeah. What brought you back here?
Because
here
it was
being
beautiful.
New York, which is where we're sitting today.
Which is ironic because the reason I came back, we're actually not sitting too far from it. 9/11 happened. And I was living out in California. I was about to get married, which I did 2.5 weeks after 9/11.
Right.
And I was planning to get married here in New York, living in California, planning to come back. 9/11 occurred, and I remember flying back here to New York to prepare for the wedding on the first flight out. Remember, they closed the airports, right? It was crazy. They closed the airports, and I was on the first flight back to New York, and I was one of 7 people on that plane, including the crew.
Wow.
It was the eeriest thing in the world. So I came back, and I ended up getting married 2.5 weeks after 9/11, and I said to myself, between all those things that were happening, it was a really crazy time, obviously. I said, I didn't have any family in California. I lived out there 13 years without any family, and I said, if the end of the world is going to happen, or when it happens, if it happens, I want to be near the people that I love the most, and that's my family. And so I had a practice out there in San Diego. I closed that up. I told my then husband, even though we were just newly married, either you move back to New York with me,
or we're done.
Or we're done right after the honeymoon.
Wow.
And he agreed to come, and that's how I ended up back in New York.
Now, you have your own practice, and it's not a small practice in
No.
Poughkeepsie.
Yes.
Did you start right away with your own practice when you moved back?
No, it was not a straight line. So I ended up moving back, and I wasn't licensed yet to practice law in New York. So that was a process in and of itself that took a bit of time. So while I was doing that, I started, I'll call it a career, I'll put it in air quotes, started doing some TV work, legal analyst work, which was great fun. And then I joined a firm in Poughkeepsie just so I could, it's not like learning a new language because I was a lawyer already for 10 years when I moved back here, but it's a different state. So they have different rules and they have different things that you need to know. So I worked for a local firm to get a lay of the land, and then I got licensed, and I stayed with that firm, and I worked my butt off, about 80 hours a week for this well-established firm in Poughkeepsie. And I remember after I was there for a year as a lawyer, they paid me as an independent contractor, and I got my 1099 at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And it was so woefully inadequate that I said, I can't, I could work someplace else and make 3 times as much without using my law degree or my credentials or the experience that I have. So that law firm stepped up and they said, well, we'll make you a partner.
Oh.
And I'm like, you didn't pay yourself that much either. So what, why would I want
me?
Yeah, right. A piece of, 25% of not a lot is still not a lot.
Right.
So it was scary at the time because I really was not able to make ends meet during this transition. But it was good in a sense because having earned so little, working so hard, I said I might as well open my own door because I can't do that much worse.
Yeah. Sometimes when there's nothing to lose, really, you're just willing to take more chances.
And that's what it did.
You started your own.
I said adios.
How many years ago was that?
That was in March 2008.
Wow. So
just over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now, you talked about the places in which you put on your armor and become an elegant warrior. And the courtroom, that's sort of an obvious one.
Yeah.
But you also talked about the business. There is a elegant warrior aspect of the business as well. Tell me about that.
Well, I think there's a big elegant warrior. And I don't know, sometimes the emphasis is on warrior and sometimes the emphasis is on elegant.
Just like in life, yeah.
But it will take the second I decided to leave the comfort of a firm that wasn't able to financially make ends meet. I left there not really knowing a whole lot. I left there without a whole lot of money because that year I hadn't earned a whole lot. So it was a scary proposition, but I did so with the gumption or with the belief that no was not an option. Failing was just not going to be an option. Not making this happen was not going to be an option. And the first year of doing that was very scary because I remember distinctly, like it was yesterday, when I left that firm and I decided to open my own doors, I went to the nicest office I could find with the most beautiful view of the Hudson River. Way more space than I needed because at the time it was just me, and way more expensive, way more money than I really had in the budget because I didn't have a whole lot in the budget. And when I signed that check for my first month's rent and security deposit on that office lease, 5-year lease, like I was in. I'm going all in. My hand was shaking. It was all the money I had, like, in the world.
Right.
And once I slid that check across the table and gave it to the landlord, I said, I have to make this happen.
Yeah.
Like, it was like burning the boats.
Yep.
That was my burning the boats.
Yeah.
And it worked.
It certainly has worked. I mean, you're doing phenomenally well. The business, you and I have had these conversations over margaritas many times.
Yes.
But the business part of what you do is very different than, many lawyers are not business people.
Right.
And we're not trained to be business people unless you go into tax law or some sort of that. And so how did you is that something that just comes naturally to you? Did you have to work to figure it out, like profits and losses? And especially in the legal world where we have to wait a period of time before we get paid by clients, and sometimes a long period of time.
Right. It was both. It was both an aptitude and sort of on-the-job training, right? Because I really was able to scale. So I started out just me. And the first year was lean. I'm not going to lie about that. But then you slowly start to figure it out. You learn how to build a client. You learn how to get the clients, number one. Then you learn how to build the clients. And all the while you're building your business, you have to still, at that time, practice law and do a great job for the clients, right? So you can keep that coming in. And as the business scaled up sort of naturally, it wasn't hard for me to figure out that, look, I can't do it all. I don't want to do it all.
Mm-hmm.
What can I delegate to other people and what can't I delegate to other people? And I quickly learned that I can hire great lawyers.
Right.
I can hire great lawyers to do that part of the job. There's only one me.
Right.
There's only one person who can market and develop the business the way I wanted it to be developed. And that was important because my firm is not a stuffed shirt, stuffy, old gray hair, no offense to those people who are, kind of law firm. I never wanted it to be that way. It never will be that way. It's not that way.
Yeah, when you talk about delegating, I think that for entrepreneurs or anyone starting their own business, it is a necessity, but
Absolutely.
It can be hard choosing which things to delegate. And
Right.
for me, the thing that I struggle with the most is taking the time to teach the person to whom I'm delegating how to do the thing. Because I
Right.
get impatient and say, "Oh, just forget about it. I'll just do it."
It's easier if I do it.
Right.
Yeah.
How did you make yourself do that?
So I think it was almost easy for me because the first thing I started delegating was actually practicing law, right? So I got to dip into talent who knew a little something or a lot of something about practicing law. So they could take a file and they could handle a case. And all I had to do was sort of manage their time and manage the income. So it wasn't that hard to do. There wasn't a whole lot that I had to teach.
Right. It would have been different if you were delegating the business side while
Yes.
you continued to do the legal side.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If our audience could see your face, they would see that would not work for Jonna.
Right. Which is why I didn't do it that way.
Right.
Like I clearly,
Sure,
I remember making the choice, like these are the things that I can do better than anybody else,
Right.
and here are the things that other people can do just as well as me, if not better.
Well, and that's the rule to good delegation, is figuring out the things that no one else can do the way that you can do, or that you don't want anyone else to do the way that you do.
Right.
Now, your legal practice, and I know that a big part of your work now is the business side, but your legal practice was and is a lot of criminal defense and a lot of divorce.
Yep.
How did you get into the divorce part? And somewhere in there, you got divorced.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that was a little bit of self-help there, and then you got into the divorce. So how did you get into the divorce? Because I know that that's a different kind of warrior. It's a different kind of warrior.
Yes, and it does, and it's a whole different animal. And to be honest with you, there was no science to it other than number one, I knew there was going to be no shortage of clients because the divorce rate in this country is and has been for quite a while and probably will remain very high. So, why not? People are going to need you in that area. Why not become the best divorce lawyer you can be? That was the main reason why I chose that area. But the second reason why I chose that area is because as a single person entrepreneur, like I don't have partners in my firm, it's me. I knew that there's a cash flow rhythm, and criminal cases can give you instant cash flow, and the divorces will give you cash flow a little bit later, and the personal injury, which we always do, could be many months down the road, but give you an even larger cash flow. So it was by design that I chose the areas of practice that I did.
Yeah, I mean, you've really built your practice by design. It's an impressive thing, and many lawyers don't. The divorce part, I've never practiced family law. The little bit that I do for Support Center for Child Advocates is the closest I get to dealing with families. But it's enormously stressful and toxic. How do you maintain your elegance or peace of mind, or however you want to frame it, when you're dealing with that? Are there certain practices that you do? Is it wine? Is it sleep? Is it movies? Is it meditation? Is it all of the above?
Wine is definitely included. I will say that. You know, it was a little bit of a shock because when I first started practicing divorce law here, and remember, it's different if there are any associate attorneys listening to me, it's a little different when you have the comfort of people above you, right? But when you are when your name is on the door and you've got your hands in the cases and you're managing all the other cases, it is a little bit of a different animal. And what I didn't realize was that it's such a stressful event for the people involved, your clients and the other side. And the other side can ramp up your client and the judges can ramp them up and the opposing counsel can, that you really have to try to manage expectations out of the gate, and it's very hard to do. So if you can't manage a person's expectation, because I can't tell you not to be sad, I can't tell you not to be, I can tell you, you're not going to listen to me. Right. You have to develop almost a bit of a shield around yourself so that you can continue to do your job even though you're being bombarded with arrows from whoever, opposing counsel, your own client, the judge, or whomever. And it's a tricky thing to master, and it takes a little while to master that.
Is it something that you just grew with experience? You know, you sort of grew that shell, or do you do certain things like before you go into a meeting, do you steel yourself for those emotions? Is it just a function of time?
It's both. I think originally it's like anything else, right? It's like almost learning to walk. You know, I fell down a lot in the beginning. Like I said, I opened my doors. It wasn't like, build it, they will come, and everything was hunky-dory. I learned by doing. I made a lot of mistakes. One of the mistakes that I've talked about before is that one of my very first clients, after I opened my own practice here, we handled her divorce start to finish, and she was a perfectly fine client. And when she came to the office to get her final divorce papers, I handed them to her with a bottle of champagne and said, "Congratulations, you're divorced. We did it." And I handed her her divorce judgment, and she burst into tears. Yeah. Burst into tears, and I thought this was a reason to celebrate. Right. By that time, my divorce had taken 5 minutes. It was the easiest divorce on earth, so I didn't realize that the period at the end of that sentence for her was going to be painful when I had gotten her from start to finish. And that was a real eye-opener for me because it's not my emotions that matter in divorce. It's my clients.
Right. And that leads me to your workshops, because I think that what you're doing there is really different, and the fact that it's coming from a divorce attorney is different. So tell us a little bit about the Positively Divorced Empowerment Workshops.
Okay. So I coined the phrase the Positively Divorced course. And what I wanted to do, and this came after 10 years of practicing here in the divorce arena, I just learned that part of the reason why divorce is such an ugly thing, like when you say the word divorce, you go walk into a party and you say the word divorce, nobody goes like, woohoo, yeah, divorce, that's fun. No, everybody gets this, oh, divorce, it's terrible, it's always awful no matter what. And I get that, and it is. But over the last 10 years, I've kind of gotten to a place where I look at certain situations like it doesn't have to be this bad. Right. And so why? And I started to question, why is it this bad? And I think when you go into any situation, we'll use divorce because I'm immersed in that. When you go into any situation thinking that it's going to be awful, it's going to be awful.
It's so funny because this is a theme that comes up in a lot of our podcast episodes, that it's the story that you tell yourself. If you tell yourself a story about divorce, and I've never been divorced, but I've seen the effects of it on other people in my life, that if you tell yourself a story that it's going to be awful, how can it not be awful?
How can it not be, right? I say when you're looking for something to be awful, you're going to get all the awful you can get because you're looking for it. But the opposite is also true, and that's one of the tenets in my Positively Divorced course is when you look for the bad, you're going to find the bad. When you look for the good, you will find the good. Why not make the choice to look for things that are going to serve you and help you as opposed to things that are going to hurt you and harm you? Right. And it can be that easy. Convincing people that it can be that easy is the hard part, but it can be that easy.
So where can people, we're going to continue this conversation, but I want to make sure we put a pin in this, because this course is really helpful for a lot of people, and I think that it's important that people know that there's resources like this out there. So where can they find that?
So you'd have to go to one of my websites, which is divorceboss.tv, spelled just like it is, divorceboss.tv. When you go to that website, you can click on the divorce course tab, and that'll give you all the information that anybody needs to to dive in.
Because I do think that when we, change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And
Yep.
so, if you can start people in thinking of divorce in a different way with all of your experience there, I certainly couldn't do it, but with all of your experience there and all those years of doing that kind of work,
Yeah.
I want to take a turn here and talk a little bit about where we met, which was at Fox News.
Yes.
And I don't want to specifically talk about Fox News, but just in general, being a legal analyst, you've been doing it for longer than I have. And I can remember the first time that I met you, I was like, oh my, I have got to be prepared when I'm talking to this woman, because she is prepared and very confident in your opinions, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in this world right now where people are not always confident in their opinions, or overly so.
Right.
So what is it that allows you to speak your truth so well? And what is it that allows you to argue it on television so well?
I think the answer to that two-part question actually has two different answers. And one of them is a lot of what I do on TV and with you and opposite you, and you've seen, is really just put my lawyer hat on. And regardless of, if I'm tasked with taking a side, then I take that side.
Yeah.
And you're not moving me off that
That's
side.
right.
And then I build my argument based on the position. And that's what we do every day. That's what we do every day.
It's amazing. It's funny. The first couple times that I ever did television, they'd say, well, which side do you want? And I was always like, just tell me which side you want me to argue, because that's what we do as lawyers, right? But a lot of people can't do that. Do you think that your ability to see both sides helps you in highly charged situations, whether it be talking about politics or in dealing with divorces or any of these things where people's emotions get so entrenched on either side?
Absolutely. Because I think in that pond is where you can do your best negotiating. Because it's not always about battling, and oftentimes it's about battling, but sometimes when you have to reach a resolution, and I tell my clients this too, there is value in resolution.
Oh, yeah.
There's
That's
value
a
in
whole chapter
resolution.
in my book about that.
Oh, good. I can't wait. But there really is. And so it's not a matter of winning and losing. It's resolving. It's how do you get to a finish line that is going to make you, if not ecstatic, then at least comfortable.
Yeah.
You don't have to, there are no winners in divorce. Sometimes there are no winners in a lot of areas of law.
Yeah. And you have to know what you want. I mean,
Right.
The chapter in my book is about settlement, but you have to, do you want to win or do you want to be happy? Because sometimes they are two very different things. And the amount of, there's a study that shows that litigation is more stressful than the event that leads to the litigation.
Right.
And I've seen that in my own practice. And so I think that the ability to see compromise as not a dirty word,
Right.
whether it be in law or in politics,
Right.
is a really good thing. It's interesting. I just did something for NBC with our mutual friend Danny Savalos, where they asked us to argue a specific topic, and then they asked us to switch sides.
Ah.
I loved it.
I would have fun doing that.
I loved it. And now I'm using that with, we're talking a week after Judge Kavanaugh's hearing, and there's a lot of debate going on.
Yes.
And I'm trying to use that when I'm talking to people who are very entrenched in either side and say, what do you think the other side's argument is?
Right.
Because I think that when we can start at least thinking about what the other side's argument is, it really opens us up to a much better conversation. Do you think TV has helped you with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, because there have been many. I mean, I've been doing it for a number of years, and there have been many times where I either got the short straw or I said, I got a side that wasn't my truth that I had to argue and get in there. And I think by doing that research and by taking that position and by advocating for the fake client, if you will, I am able to see both. So that it forces you to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it also forces you to be elegant with it.
Yes.
That you can't attack and hate. And, so many times, and I'm sure you get this too, when I try my cases in front of juries. And when I walk out of the courtroom, I might be chatting with opposing counsel. And sometimes my clients are like, what's going on there? But we see it all the time at Fox. Sometimes before my day, I would see you on Megyn Kelly's show when she had and you would go at it with Arthur Aidala or whoever it was.
Yep.
And then you'd be friends and go out for a drink afterwards.
We still are.
Yeah, it's there's some value in that.
Absolutely. And I think attorneys know that. I mean, one of my, just a little bit of a tangent.
Yeah.
When I first got here and working for that other firm, when I came across an opposing counsel in a divorce matter who was a quintessential. I don't want to use the colorful language.
It's okay, right?
But it was. I know this is your. I don't want to degrade your podcast. Yes. But let's just say so. People would probably describe him as a body part, okay? And I was one of those people who would describe him as a body part. And he had done something in the courtroom. We walked out in the hallway, and I looked at him and I said, "Do you get paid more to be a jerk, that body part?" And he looked at me and he was just like stunned. But that was really like he was making an argument that didn't need to be made. And it was almost like he was putting on a show for his client. Years later, I can look back and see why he did that, because some clients think you're not fighting for them if you're not fighting.
Yep.
And that's another thing that I describe in my course. That's not, no, that's it's a wrong principle. That's not the way it is.
Yeah. There are times you have to go to war, but they are far fewer and not as intense as people who watch it on television or the clients who want to see you go to war think it should be.
And I think, in fact, the necessity of going to war is so infrequent. I could say it would almost happen if somebody else is breaking a rule. If you're following the rules and everybody knows how something is supposed to go, there's an ebb and there's a flow and everybody's working within the parameters. If somebody goes outside, if somebody, in my case, say that somebody's hiding an asset, then it's a little bit different. But if all the money's on the table and I know how it's going to get divvied up in the eyes of the law and opposing counsel knows how it's going to get divvied up in the eyes of the law, I don't have to punch opposing counsel in the face to get it.
That's right.
And my client doesn't need to feel uncomfortable if I'm not punching opposing counsel in the face to get it.
Well, and a lot of times, one of the things that I try to get my clients to understand is they are served by us having a better relationship with opposing counsel, because then you can reach some compromise and you don't have to fight over every little thing and you don't have to make the judges angry. There's a lot of value in avoiding the war when you can. And, one of the things I talk about in the book is the difference between moving for progress or moving for friction. And if you're moving for friction and fighting, you start fires and maybe you want to start a fire. But that doesn't happen very often. Most of the time, everybody just wants to make some progress.
Yeah, I don't know how often starting a fire will actually serve you unless you want your house to burn down. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I think people have to get past. What is that? What is that phrase? Don't mistake my kindness for weakness.
That's right.
And in the divorce realm, clients think that an awful lot, and they're oftentimes just completely wrong.
Yeah. There's strength in kindness. We had Kelly Rutherford on, and she was talking about the feminine strength that we're sort of starting to see now, and I think that that's something that we're going to start to recognize more and more. Well, as we start to wrap up, I want to ask you a couple questions about elegance. Now, you also have a radio show.
Yes.
And when that's on Thursdays?
It airs on Sunday mornings.
Okay.
2 times. Yeah.
I know that you talk a lot on that radio show about books. So one of the questions I like to ask my guests is not your favorite book, but the book that sort of epitomizes elegance for you, whatever that may mean.
I will give you the book that literally changed my life. Now, there have been a few, but like I'm into the law of attraction, and I've studied that, and Abraham Hicks, and I've done that. And they've been life-changing books too. But the one book that I credit with actually changing my life is a book entitled Excuses Begone by the late Dr. Wayne Dyer. And I remember where I was. See, when things impact you, you remember where you are when they happen. I remember where I was. I was listening to the book, and he gave a quote that I use to this day because it was very impactful to me. And the quote is, and you actually said it earlier today, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I was studying that book and reading that book, and I heard that quote. I was walking around a track in LaGrangeville around a pond. And it was the turning point between being the lawyer that worked for somebody else, not making ends meet, and the person who was going to fulfill her dreams, no matter how much work it took, no matter how hard it was going to be, by looking at things. I didn't want to look at things from an employee standpoint, from a poor standpoint. I wanted to look at things from where I wanted my life to be, and then sort of pull it all toward that. And it was life-changing. It still is life-changing for me.
Excuses Begone.
Excuses Begone.
I don't think I've read a lot of his books, and I don't think I've read that one.
Yeah.
Well, Jonna, I love chatting with you, and we will definitely, if you're good with it, have you back. I'm sure that our audience will probably have some questions, especially about the divorce course.
Sure.
So where else can they find you? You talked about that one website. I want to make sure you've got your law firm site.
Yeah, so my main law firm site is jonnaspilborlaw.com. There's a lot of information on there. I am all over social media, but I think my friends find me most on Facebook. So you could always send me a message. And I do try to reply to everybody.
And you're also very funny. You are a very good writer. So if you want some interesting insights from Jonna and the animals that she keeps all around her house in Poughkeepsie, check out her Facebook page.
If you can't sleep and you're bored and you need something to peruse. Yeah, so you can find me on social media, and I really do try to engage with people, and I love doing that. So I'm around.
Well, Jonna, thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather.
That was Jonna Spilbor, one of our guests here on the Elegant Warrior podcast. I want to thank you for listening to this episode of The Elegant Warrior. For more episodes with inspiring, elegant guests like Jonna, please head on over to heatherhansenpresents.com. This episode was brought to you by Boyle's Naturals. I'm Heather Hansen, and you've been listening to the Elegant Warrior podcast. If you liked it, please review it, share it with your friends. Word of mouth is a great way to share these things, and you can also let people know by writing up a review on the podcast subscription area of your choice. Thanks so much.